and Childless Not By Choice person. Today I'm coming on because we are talking about the second half of night 2 in the book, The Courage to Be Disliked. It is our current Sonder Sisterhood book club. And typically we do one book a month, but this is a bit dense. It's a little bit harder for me to get through. And so I'm splitting it up. And I just finished reading the second half of the second night. And this book is about kind of Adler's psychology. And I feel like there are things about this that I'm absolutely buying into, other things I'm questioning along the way. So as we are talking about this today, I may say things. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have formed an opinion or landed on something specifically, but what it does mean is that I'm just processing and we're talking about it and just having fun with it. So let's dive in. Again, the book is The Courage to Be Disliked. So this part of the chapter kind of continues this conversation around that a lot of stress or discomfort that people feel is really about conflict or disruption in interpersonal relationships. And it really talks about it in a way of not in terms of what somebody else is doing to us or the people we choose, but more so how we're interpreting and how we're processing interpersonal relationships. So the concept that they are talking about initially is the competition. And that many of us are in competition in interpersonal relationships, and that whether we're doing that intentionally or not, that's there. And if we feel like we struggle with feeling seen, we struggle in a relationship, we struggle making friends, we struggle with our own self-worth within interpersonal relationships, it will challenge you to think about, are you in a competitive spirit, or do you have a competitive spirit with that? And again, this happens subtly and may not be something that you're initially thinking of. Hello, Quentin. Hi. This is a book club, and we're talking about The Courage to Be Disliked. So why is this so distressful, or why is this so difficult for people? If you're in an interpersonal relationship or you enter into interpersonal relationships related to, and you come in with a spirit of competition. And here's what they say, and this makes a lot of sense. If you're entering interpersonal relationships through competition, that means you see people as winners or losers, right? That means if you're winning, somebody else is losing, or if the opposite can be true. It means that if something good happens to somebody else in your life, you don't see that necessarily as, oh, I'm very happy for them, but you see that then as an inferiority in yourself. And that's hard to maintain, right? That's hard to accept. That's hard to feel on a daily basis. You start to compare yourself to other people. You start to compare what other people have. I think those of us who maybe are childless, not by choice, I think we really sometimes get sucked into a lot of comparisons because it feels like other people are living the life that we want. That's just what it is for this channel, but it could be somebody has the job you want, someone has the partner that you want, somebody has the car that you want, somebody lives in the neighborhood that you want. And when you are constantly looking at things through a competitive spirit, then it's only natural that sometimes people can form enemies, right? Or you can have more of a spirit where this person isn't my friend, but this is someone, again, I'm in competition with, and those people who are in competition with, the landing of that is winners or losers, or maybe even enemies or adversaries. So I think this was an interesting concept to talk about, particularly in the childless, not by choice space, because I do think there's a lot of things in society or the way that things get framed where it's about wanting what somebody else has. It's about wanting something that you've been told that you should want. Like, you can get pretty like deep in this. So what the author says here is a state to pursue or a state to consider is looking at people as comrades. Because when you start to look at people as comrades, the competition starts to die away. When you are able to do that, then you might be able to be more helpful. You might be able to see the people around you as community. You see them as somebody who's working alongside of you. This is tricky. It's hard. And, when we think about that in the childless, not by choice space, how might we be able to kind of turn the concept in that way? I think of it as, if I'm not thinking about people as kind of having something that I want, then maybe I can be in a relationship with them where I'm able to appreciate what I bring to the relationship more and appreciate what they bring to the relationship more. It allows maybe for some more vulnerability, which then leads to more like intimacy in terms of being able to get to know somebody. It's difficult. Now, as I've said before, some of my pushback on this is, how can you negate the past? How can you not consider what's happened to somebody in the past in terms of how this all develops? And I'm not saying that I am really strong in that belief, because in this chapter, he actually starts to convince me, right, that ultimately it's about the here and now, and the only thing you can change is what's happening now and moving forward. But I wanted to talk a little bit about it. So I am going to read this, and this is directly from the book, page 82, because what I put in the margins, or annotated in the margins in here, is what is my pushback, I guess, to all of this. Hold on. I'm just going to see if I can block somebody. Okay. This is the second time I've had to block somebody. It gets disorienting, so I apologize because I've lost my train of thought, but I'll come back to it. So, okay, so this is what it is. So he says, okay, all of this talk about teleology, which is looking at things in the present, not looking at the cause and effect of the past, and such as pure sophistry, I don't know what that is, I'm sorry, and trauma definitely does exist, and people cannot break free from the past. Surely you realize that. That's the youth talking to the philosopher here. So he's challenging that concept. We cannot go back to the past in a time machine. As long as the past exists as the past, we live within context from the past. If one were to treat the past as something that does not exist, that would be the same as negating the entire life one has had. Are you suggesting I choose such an irresponsible life? And the philosopher says, it is true that one cannot use a time machine or turn back the hands of time. But what kind of meaning does one attribute to past events? That is the task that is given to you now. And this is where the concept of changing your beliefs around things comes in. How about changing how you subscribe to what you think about the past? Again, this is why we're doing this in small bits, because it gets a little dense and it gets a little difficult to talk about. So it's not the past, it's about the goal, is what this book is saying. And if you stay within this competition mindset, and let's say you're the loser, or you don't have what the other people have, and I don't mean you directly as a loser, but the dynamic in which it's set up, right, kind of begs those verbiage. Then if you are not winning, sometimes what people move then to is revenge. And so then we act where we have the goal of revenge. And this is his pushback with that. the philosopher, he says, if someone were to abuse me to my face, I would think about the person's hidden goal. Even if you are not directly abusive, when you feel genuinely angry due to another person's words or behaviors, consider that the person is challenging you to a power struggle. So what that they're saying is, if somebody is engaging with you in a way that's really negative, again, it's not about you. It's about what they're trying to elicit out of you. This is hard. It's deep. It gets deep. And another reason why, let's move out of competition, because you can never get in a place with somebody then where there's a mutual relationship, right? It's always this back and forth. So the current goal can be realized not because they're motivated by the past, but they're motivated by what are they trying to do in the moment. So in the book, the author uses the example of a rebellious kid or a rebellious teenager. The author would say a rebellious teenager is engaging in this behavior not because of their home environment, but because they're trying to exact revenge on their parents. And they know acting like that is going to create hardship for their parents. And here's the question that I wrote in the side related to that. Is our current goal, and when I say our, I mean those of us who are childless, not by choice. PhD Diva, hi, I'm so glad you're here because this is a heavy concept. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. I don't know if you've read this book yet, but it's about like Adler's psychology. So I would love to hear what you think about it, because I'm still in this phase where like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, makes total sense. And then when I start to like think about it from the forest view, I poke a little holes in it. So, but ultimately, what I love about this is that we all have the power within, is kind of what the large sort of piece of the book is. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm so glad you showed up. So anyway, when I say our, I'm talking about the Childless Not By Choice community. And so what I put in the side here is our current goal, those of us who are struggling with relationships, friendships, things like that, is our current goal to be seen and validated. Just some of the ways that we, again, this is Adler speaking, choose to think about things, feel about things, maybe staying stuck in certain beliefs, and then how those beliefs impact us. Is it because we feel like we can't let that go because we need people to see us and validate this experience? Do I stay in maybe anger, envy, jealousy because I need people to hear and feel and see me? I mean, I don't know, I think I'm moving through that, but I do think maybe when I was in a lot of grief and feeling a lot of depression around it, it was a way to kind of alert people to the fact that like, I need you to see this and know that I'm going through this. Because again, with childlessness, it's not something people are generally asking about or feeling about. So was my goal in that state to feel seen and heard? Something, I don't know, it's just something I'm contemplating in that. And if I change my goal, then can my thoughts and feelings change? And when thoughts change, feelings can change. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next concept. I wrote them down again because they're tricky concepts, but this is at the very beginning of the chapter, admitting fault is not defeat. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that too. Like, when we're in difficult states, do we have a goal? And if we can shift our goal, then can we shift our state? So the next piece I want to talk about is the philosopher stating, no, the idea that you are bearing it, sort of like putting up with and gritting through this really difficult time is proof that you are still stuck in the power struggle. When you are challenged to a fight and you sense that it is a power struggle, you step down from the conflict as soon as possible. Do not answer the action with a reaction. This is the only thing we can do. I do think when we're kind of constantly justifying our experience and justifying our grief, that's where I kind of, that comes up for me here. And what I wrote here is, could we do this when we feel challenged by society, right? Or even in the United States, like the political stuff that's coming around related to not having kids. Are we able to just step out of the power struggle? It's hard. I think that's where community can come in, because you can maybe do so and do that a little bit better in community. Because he says, after all, anger is a tool and a means for achieving a goal. And many of us use anger as the only tool and the only way to achieve a goal, when courage might be one, right? Acceptance might be one. So there's other ways of doing that. Again, I just trying to put out there that I don't know where I'm landing on this, but it's definitely getting my brain thinking. And then he says, it's only when we take away the lens of competition and winning and losing within interpersonal relationships that we can begin to correct and change ourselves. Shit. That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. But again, it's stopping in competition with people, because you're getting caught up in power struggles. You're getting caught up in scenarios where anger is the only anchor. Anger is the only tool available to you. Lay that, in the therapy world, we sometimes talk about lay that bag of bricks down, because it's ultimately weighing on you. And not only does it allow for us to be able to change and grow, but it allows us to be able to connect with others, maybe in a different way, even if we have different life circumstances, right? If I'm not competing with somebody, then I'm able to be of service, be of help, accept help, and get to know somebody in a more honest way, because I'm not constantly trying to win. All right, I'm skipping over a little bit because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to talk about all that on the internet. So I will say, no matter how I land with some of this, in this book, this is going to be one of the major takeaways for me. I'd love to hear what your takeaways are so far. But one of the major takeaways for me is this concept of Talology, I think is how you pronounce it, where it's about what's happening now and identifying what is serving you now. You're doing things because you're getting some type of benefit. It could be a secondary benefit, but you are doing it because of the here and now, versus you're doing things based on the past, and that there's a cause and effect that you cannot impact. This gives us the power to not have to wait for others to change. I think for those of us who are childless not by choice, if I hone in on this one thing, I think that's really impactful, because the idea that society is going to change related to judgment or thoughts and feelings around women of a certain age being single and not having kids, I think is going to be difficult. I think it's constantly evolving and changing. I'm not saying that that's hopeless or that's not happening, but I don't want to wait on that. Especially when I look up and like childless cat lady is back in the zeitgeist, right? So what I like about this is this puts the power on me. This puts the power within me. And that's powerful. The next concept I want to talk about is a life lie, and he talks about they talk about the life lie is the state of coming up with all manner of pretexts in order to avoid the life tasks is a life lie. So it's about, quite frankly, it's about coming up with excuses. I will tell you, I do this. I think in our heart of hearts, we all do this. It's nothing to judge yourself on. I'm not saying it as a way to pass judgment on others, but we all come up with pretexts or excuses. I'm not saying that they're not rooted in things that we need to be aware of. I'm not saying that they're not rooted in things that don't make things very difficult, that might not even be challenges for us to think about. But we have the power to sort of shift and change, is what he is saying. So let me read you a little bit of kind of what he talks about with that. He's just straight up comes out and says it. Instead of waiting for others to change or waiting for the situation to change, you take the first step forward yourself. And again, that's the power in stepping forward. When it talks about reasons why we might avoid things, right? Because of these life lies, like I'm avoiding certain things for some of these life lies. I think for me personally, I do this mostly in the singleness space, where I come up with reasons why I don't want to be in a relationship, or it's not the right time for me, or that person isn't the right person. And I do that, if I'm going to be totally vulnerable here, right? I do that because I'm risk averse. and that's where I'm going to draw the direct correlation to maybe I need to have the courage to be disliked, the courage to move forward instead of constantly being in a state of self-protection, right? Adler would say, I have these beliefs that I've chosen to believe that serve the purpose to protect myself. They're not facts. It's not, even if I can demonstrate, I get in this with my own therapist all the time, where I'm like, well, I have a history of stuff to prove this right. And she's like, you pick and choose what things you do. And she's like, it's not necessarily a pattern in terms of data to prove your point if you're doing the same thing and getting the same result. And I'm like, okay, if my therapist is watching this, hi. So we have to change our own goal, is what they say. I need to change my goal away from self-protection to be something different if I want a different result. And many of us don't even realize what our goals are. So something to think about is truly sit down, and whether that's with a therapist or some journaling or just contemplation, like, what are your goals? And I think I'm pretty much settled and sort of recognize that my goal is self-protection. My goal is absolutely self-protection. And so in order for my circumstance to change, I have to change that goal. Shit. Yeah, it's, I think some of us, when we talk about relationships or friendships in terms of the childlessness space, I do think sometimes it's possible. Like, what do you think are some of the goals that people might have, right? I think one of the goals could be emotionally protect yourself, because it's hard to be in friendships with people who, again, going back to the competition piece, that have something you want, and maybe we self-isolate because our goal isn't actually to make friends, but our goal is to self-protect. I'm not calling anyone out. I'm just talking and contemplating this through Adler. oh, it's, again, I had therapy last week and I probably spent a good 20 minutes talking about this book because I was like, what is going on? Because I couldn't decide if I was like, yes, I have the power, I can make the change, this is liberating. And I couldn't decide if like this is through the lens of some man who from a long time ago who hasn't quite, and I don't mean some man as derogatory, but like all of these psychologists are all from a similar population. So I couldn't decide. I'm still working through that. And again, the fact that you and no one else are the one who can decide your lifestyle. I hear that and I'm like, yes, that's empowering. And then also I'm like, yeah, but there's just so much that influences people. And so maybe it's true, but maybe depending on your influences, it can take a long time to get there. You may not use the power of anger to look away. This is a very important point. Adler never discusses the life tasks or life lies in terms of good and evil. It's not morals or good and evil that we should be discussing, but the issue of courage. Right, so it's not you're a bad person if you have these life lies. But maybe there's a tad bit lack of courage. That's me. I'm raising my hand on that. I absolutely, I am so risk averse. I am very risk averse. And so the last paragraph of the chapter is, even if you're avoiding your life tasks and clinging to your life lies, it isn't because you are steeped in evil. It is not an issue to be condemned from a moralistic standpoint. It's only an issue of courage. And if I'm going to push back a little bit on Adler here at the very end, I'm like, yeah, but maybe my lack of courage is because of the things that happened to me in the past. So how can you separate those out? But alas, that brings us to the end of the second night. And it looks like in the third night, we're going to talk about action steps or things that you can do, according to Adler, in order to develop more courage. So I'm really looking forward to that. All right. I'd like to think I'm finding folks with whom to relate, organize, bounce ideas off of, etc. But yes, the shadow possibility is that I'm just hiding out. I know it's, and I think I've known I've been hiding out for a long time. And again, so I respect that, and I need to stop hiding out if I want things to be different. I absolutely understand that. And I think what sort of created a scenario in which I felt like I had to hide out. And Adler might say, that's irrelevant. And when I'm in a really good space, I think, yeah, it probably is, right? The idea is I have to step forward instead of sort of staying in that same spot. But there's a human part of me that needs that thing validated before I can then move forward. Thankfully, I think through this community, I'm feeling validated in that a little bit more. But if you haven't read it, again, not to put you on the spot here, but I would love to get your take on this. I think there's 4 nights, so we're about halfway through the book. These guys have also wrote a different book called The Courage to Be Happy. So, yeah, I'm enjoying this so far, and would recommend it for people who like to kind of think about and noodle around hard things, difficult concepts, or who feel like you're in a place in your life where you're like, God, I want things to be different. And if you need a little boost to remind yourself that yeah, it's actually, you can change some things, and you don't have to wait for society to change. Again, I know I'm talking about it in terms of the concept of this channel, which is being single and childless, not by choice. Well, I think I'm going to end it here. And hopefully you're able to follow along and get some nuggets as I'm processing out loud. I'm a verbal processor, in case you haven't been able to tell. But if you would like more book club stuff, let me know if there's any books that you would like us to do. I think we have 3 months where I'm still looking for books. And it doesn't have to be nonfiction. It can be fiction too. The fiction book that I'm reading, let me go get it. The fiction book that I'm reading right now is Funny Story by Emily Henry. So I'm in my reading era right now. Good to see everybody. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one.